This father never imagined that booking a bed and breakfast for his family's vacation would lead to the biggest scare of his life. The house, located deep in a forest, seemed perfect for a peaceful retreat. But things took a frightening turn when he took a photo of his son and wife. Lovin had one goal on this trip: to record as much video as possible. He wanted his son's first holiday to be unforgettable, and he planned to capture every moment with the new video camera he had just bought. Logan asked his wife to keep chatting while he set up the camera. With a cheerful voice, his wife called their son to crawl toward her, smiling as she did. Logan was happy he had caught the sweet moment on video, but when he reviewed the footage, his face went pale and his hands started shaking. His wife, Danielle, noticed his scared and confused look. "What's wrong? You look scared," she asked. Logan didn't reply at first, but then he spoke, staring at the camera screen in disbelief. There was something else in the video that wasn't supposed to be there, and it terrified him. He called Danielle over quickly to see if she noticed it too. "I need to know I'm not imagining this," he said. When Danielle looked at the screen, she saw it too. They both glanced up from the camera at the same time. What they had seen wasn't just on the video, it was real. A red blinking light was shining in the woods behind their son. What was it? They hesitated at first, but eventually, both of them decided they wanted to find out what the blinking light was. Nervously, they approached the line of trees on the edge of the field. After Lovin's search turned up nothing, they decided they didn't want to stay out in the open much longer. They packed up their picnic gear and headed back inside the house. Within the comfort of the walls, they hoped to brush off the nervous feeling that consumed them. But unfortunately for them, that feeling did not last long. That very night, they experienced a second fright, this one far more alarming. Lovin was the first to wake up. A strange static noise was echoing throughout the bed and breakfast. It was distant but unsettling enough to rouse him from sleep. "Danielle, wake up!" he shouted, shaking his wife violently awake. Danielle opened her eyes just enough to see her husband's worried face. "What is it, Lovin?" she asked groggily. Lovin nudged her a bit more and said he had heard a strange noise in the house. It seemed to be coming from the kitchen downstairs. "Don't you hear it?" "It's probably just a raccoon," she replied, already lying back down. But Lovin wasn't convinced. He grabbed the baseball bat from his sports bag and slowly headed down the stairs, with Danielle following behind. The noise eventually led them to the kitchen, where they encountered an eerie surprise. An old TV sat on the kitchen table, looking like it was from the 90s. What terrified them was the footage playing on the screen. It showed them from earlier that day, playing in the field as a family. Danielle and Lovin exchanged horrified glances and immediately rushed upstairs to pack. While Lovin grabbed the last of their clothes, Danielle put their son in his car seat and hurried downstairs. Before leaving, Lovin wanted to check the TV one last time. The footage was still playing, and when they looked behind the TV, they saw two long cables leading out of the open window. "Look, Danielle, the cables are leading outside," Lovin exclaimed, his voice tinged with excitement. Lovin reached out of the window, slowly pulling the cords. After a few seconds, they were met with a familiar sight. The cables were attached to a camera feeding the footage directly to the television. It looked like the same recorder from earlier that day. This time, they decided to examine it more closely. They closed the camera's side screen and inspected it from every angle. Then they found their first clue. On the side of the screen was a label that read, "Property of Westgate Living." What could that mean? Danielle wondered aloud. With no time to waste, they drove straight to the local police station, hoping to get some answers. There, they explained the strange occurrences at the B&B to the officer, and strangely enough, the man in uniform seemed to know exactly which B&B they were talking about. But that's when this family surprised the officer. Unlike other families who came by with only scary stories, this family brought hard proof of the bizarre events. Lovin reached into his bag and pulled out the camera that started it all. The officer's eyes widened as he gazed at the small black device. After that, it was time to research the name on the label. The officer opened an internet browser on his computer and typed in Westgate Living. It turned out that Westgate Living was a retirement home, and it was located in a woodland area just a mile away from the family's B&B. "We have to go there," Danielle said, and both Logan and the officer agreed. They drove over to the retirement home. The trio, along with their little baby boy, entered the building and approached the front desk. Logan placed the recorder on the receptionist's desk. That's when the woman behind the desk said something Logan did not expect. "Hey, it's finally back," the woman shouted to her colleague. Logan was taken aback by her remark and asked for an explanation. "A resident reported it missing after renting it out about a month ago," she replied. This fact piqued the trio's curiosity, and they asked for the room number of the resident. When they entered the room, they came face to face with an elderly man. The old man did not seem fazed at all by the couple and the officer standing in his room. It was as if he had been expecting their arrival. "All right, you caught me," he said before they could utter a single word. Danielle held up the camera, and the man immediately began explaining. He said that he was the original owner of the B&B they were staying in. He'd never wanted to leave his home, but his son didn't care about him. When he turned 70, his son placed him in the retirement home. His son just wanted to profit from the woodland home, so pushing his father aside was an easy decision for him. But the old man didn't want to spend the rest of his life in the retirement home. He wanted his home back. That's why he spent his days commuting between the retirement home and the B&B. To do what? Danielle asked. The old man explained that he used everything in his power to scare the renters of the vacation home, hoping that eventually it would remain unrented. Maybe then his son would give up and he could finally return to his beloved home. "Well, that worked," Danielle said angrily. But Logan didn't seem angry at all. He started crying intensely and stepped forward to hold the old man's hand. "This story moved me deeply," Logan said. "And not just that, I want to help you." Logan explained that his father had passed away a few months ago. He and Danielle had tried to care for him in his final years, and seeing this old man in a similar situation filled him with sorrow and empathy. He promised to speak with the man's son and help find a way for the elderly man to return to his beloved home. The officer, seeing the emotional moment, offered to help with any legal issues to solve the problem. Danielle, holding their baby, agreed. They promised to make sure the elderly man could stay in his home for the rest of his life. Logan explained how he and Danielle had taken care of his father until it became too hard and they had to move him to a nursing home. He mentioned having a large amount of money saved and that they were looking for a good use for it. "I think we found the perfect way to use it," Logan said. Logan got the old man's son's number and called him, offering to buy the house. The son agreed quickly, but Logan wasn't buying it for himself. Once the sale was done, he gave the house to the elderly man and told him he could stay there for as long as he wanted. The only downside was that the family could only visit once a year during their vacation. Still, it worked out well for both sides. The most important thing was helping the elderly man, and having a vacation home wasn't a bad deal either.